This is something that happened to me a couple of months ago. So one Saturday I just randomly decided to take a trip up to Keno Island off Wellington Point in Queensland. And I asked my neighbour if she could come with me. And so off we went, and we got up there and we drove past a church that was having, my neighbour spotted it and she asked if we could go in there. It was having some sort of a community day and they were offering free breakfast and coffees. So we stopped in there and had a lovely breakfast, and they had an op shop in there. We did some op shopping and I met the pastor of the church, and he had a really good vibe, and it was a lovely morning. And then we drove on up to take a walk out to Keno Island, which is an island that it's a tidal island. So when the tide comes in, you can't get out to it. Unfortunately, by the time we got up there, the tide had come in and it was inaccessible. But I had seen, as we pulled up, there was a number of people that were still walking over to the island, even though the tide was coming in, and it was a big tide because it was near a full moon. So we got out of the car and I decided to take a walk to the left-hand side of Keno Island, and there's a little beach, a patrolled beach there, and there was a whole heap of people, little kids playing there, and there's actually a lifeguard on duty sitting there, but he was keeping his eye on this little area in front of him. And I just had a feeling to keep walking down to the left-hand side, the little beach further down in the mangroves, and I just got a knowing to stop, and turned around and went and to sit in a spot that was looking directly out to the left of the island. Now this is in Moreton Bay, and there's a lot of sharks, and it's tidal, so the tide was actually pulling in. And as I sat there, I looked out and I could see they were so far out that they looked like two buoys, those little balls that float to tell boats to go around. And but I looked further, and I've got really good long eyesight, and I said to my neighbour, who by this time sat down beside me, I said, "I think there's people out there." And she said, "No, it looks like buoys." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I kept looking at them, and sure enough, it was two people, and they were actually occasionally it was two or three actually, but yeah, I could mainly see the two, but they were putting their hand up every so often, which means here in Australia, that means I'm in trouble, so I looked over at the lifeguard, and he was just paying attention to the little kids, and there's families in front of him. And so I decided to raise an alert. So I got my neighbour to run up there, and she's fitter than me, and told the lifeguard, and so off he went out to rescue them. And they had actually been struggling. They had been pulled by the huge incoming tide, and were struggling. So we saved 2 lives that day. This is how God uses me as a vessel, and I am all praise to the Most High God for that. So thank God that those lives were saved that day. On the way back we came through Cleveland. I was driving, and suddenly the vibe changed. I can only say it feels like you're walking in two worlds at times. There was we went through 2 different suburbs, and there was on each major corner there was these big creepy clowns, because there was a circus that was coming into town, but they were, just clowns give me a bad vibe. And suddenly I was surrounded by, well, there was a couple of police cars behind me, and then suddenly the lights kept on, 3 sets of lights actually, were green, and as soon as I approached, they went orange, red, orange, red, orange, red, and I had to slam the brakes on each time, and it almost was like it was set up to have, so these police that were flanking me, it was almost like it was set up for me to be fined, or, you know, I don't know. It was just really bizarre, and I've always had a, you know, if you know my story, it's police have been involved in nearly all of my targeting. So, yeah, my neighbour was mind boggled. She's like, why are those lights changing so much? And why are the police around us? And I'm like, I couldn't really say much to her because I haven't really told her much of my story. So, there's a little side note here. I actually think that she may be part of my watchers, you know, gang stalkers, because I believe that she is being paid to watch me, because she does patrol around my home, and she has told me that she receives Bitcoin, and also her ex-partner was a police officer, a high-up police officer, and I do believe that she is part of Community Watch thing, even though I don't hold it against her. I, you know, sometimes, what's that old saying, keep your enemies close. I don't really consider an enemy. I'm not very close friends with her, but I do have a heart for her, because she's had major struggles through her life as well. But she doesn't know that part that I know. There was also odd things that happened with when I had my little dog, and she was living across the street at the time, and she, every time that I would take my little dog for a walk, she would suddenly appear behind me and try and start conversations. This is when I first met her. This is going back a year and a half or so ago. She would just, you know, so I'm walking my dog 3, 4, 5 times a day, and every time she would come out, and I was like, because of how I am and what's happened in my life, because I have a lot of like God-led things that happen, that's saving those 2 lives. That's not the first time that I've been used to save lives. I've actually, that's actually happened to me probably about 9 times now, that I've just been placed in the right position to assist people. So what happened with her was, sorry, I'm just letting my cat out. Yeah, so she kept on, every time that I would walk my little dog, she would be there, and it was quite annoying, because when I'm walking my dog, I want to be peaceful and calm, and he was quite hyper as it was. He was still in training. He was only young, and she had a little dog as well, and every time she'd start the conversation and be walking along with me, that meant that my little dog was trying to jump all over her little dog, and then it became not a peaceful time at all. But I did think that God's guided me to her for some reason, so I allowed it. But it did get to the point where I had to end up giving my dog away. I gave him to a lovely family with 2 little kids on 8 acres in the valley. So it was, he went to a beautiful place, but that's besides the point. I do think that they actually targeted my dog, because he became really, I live in an upstairs apartment, so that's the reason why I was out walking with him so much. It was also taking me out into the community. And they don't want that. They want me isolated. So when I was out and about with going to dog parks and chatting to people and things like that, that goes against what their whole agenda is, to isolate me. So yeah, my little dog became, I don't know, just strange. He'd like, I'd walk him for like I said, 4 or 5 times a day, take him to the dog park, etc. And then, he'd sit there and just stare at me like he kept wanting to go out. And it just became really frustrating with him, especially being in a small apartment. And then he developed this where he just had the runs all the time. So I was just continuously cleaning up after him, and also losing my temper with him. Not that I ever hurt him or anything, but I was getting to that point where I was like, no, this is just not happening. But the point, going back to my neighbour, the reason why I believe now that she was watching me all that time was because she'd invited me up a couple of times to her unit, and we'd be sitting there, and back then I was drinking. I don't drink anymore, but I was sitting there having a couple of glasses of wine, and we'd have a chat, and there was a lot of questioning, so back then I didn't know about, I hadn't found all the targeted individuals and all about gang stalking and all that kind of thing. So I had no reference point for any of it, of what was happening. All it felt was it's just weird, and can't put your finger on it, but something off kind of thing. But you tend to ignore your instincts when you're a good person because you just want to believe that everyone else is a good person, with no agenda behind a friendship. But this one particular time I went up there to her unit, and I went out onto the balcony that looks directly at my house, and she was in cooking or something, and she'd forgot to cover. So her little balcony was enclosed with curtainy type stuff, and this particular time she'd forgotten to put to cover this flap part, and it was open, and as I was sitting in the seat where she normally sits, I could see directly to my unit, and I thought, oh my goodness, she's been watching me that whole time. It wasn't a coincidence that she was coming down every time I would walk Ollie. She was watching, and she was waiting for me to come out to do that. So anyway, that neighbour, I ended up, she was getting harassed actually at her, I don't know whether this is all rubbish that she told me now that I look back. And she only wanted to get into my block of units so that she could do the patrol, because she patrols around here every single morning, and she's constantly, I hear her back and forward all the time. But yeah. I actually enabled her to get into this unit because she told me that the people over there were poisoning her garden and harassing her and, throwing things at her walls and making noise every time she went out. And she had one neighbour that was following around and mumbling things under his breath and all that. So she was basically telling me that she was being harassed and wanted my help to get out, and I played a big part in getting her out of there and getting her into this unit. I mean, I went above and beyond to help her out with that, because I was, anyway, it's a really long story, but so yeah, I'm helping my gang stalkers out. I didn't realise until just recently, that's only going back 8-9 months, that I realised that I heard the term gang stalking, and now all the pictures are starting to come together, to form one big puzzle. I mean, all the puzzle pieces are coming together. So, yeah. Also, I do think that her ex-partner had probably put her on to the little bit of extra. I don't know how much they get, but I know that she's, like I said, she is paid in Bitcoin, and I'm sure, because she has that kind of personality where she'd probably do that for free, the community watch thing, the hidden community watch thing. So I'm pretty sure that her ex-partner, the police officer, would have told her about that program, and it's a little bit of extra cash inflow for her. So yeah, that's my story of what happened a couple of months ago and how I lost my little dog. And he was definitely, I don't know whether they used Jews on him or how they did it, but he became really, really odd, and his behaviour became really odd, and then he started the pooping himself all over the place, and yeah, it just got to the point where I had to let him go, which was really, really sad, because he did actually get me out and about a lot more than I normally do. So yeah, that's it for today. Over and out, and God bless you all.